Hey, Book Dragons, I'm so glad you've joined me today. If you're new here, my name is Charles McGarry, also known as Bookish Chaz, and I'm a book lover, and I'm also an author. I wrote Talendor's Guest and The Nomad's Crucible. You can pick those up on Amazon if you want, and I'd love it if you did that. I have a book review for you today. I recently read the amazing little book known as The Ice Dragon by George R.R. Martin. And guys, this was the perfect read for this time of the year. It's starting to get really cold where I am. And I'm in Arizona, so it's not like cold maybe compared to where you live. I don't know where you live, but at least where I'm at, it's cold for me in Arizona. So this was a perfect book to read during this time of the year. And let's get right to it and start talking a little bit about it. What's it about? This follows a young girl named Adara. She was born during a very hard winter season at the expense of her mother's life. And as she's grown up, she's always been a bit different than her siblings. Whereas they will start getting really cold as the winter sets in, and they won't be staying out real late as the temperatures drop and playing outside. But she will. She feels completely at home in that kind of weather, and she'll be out playing when all the other children have gone in. And she doesn't really get very cold because she's just kind of naturally cold because of the time of year she was born in. And she's a bit estranged from her family, partly because of her mother's death. And she keeps seeing an ice dragon flying above the plains during the winter time, and she feels a strange kinship to the ice dragon. And over time, she befriends the ice dragon, and they become somewhat close companions. And this was just a really neat little tale. What did I like about it? I loved the atmosphere for one. This is so perfectly set in a way that gives you a very wintry feel. You might get chills while you're reading it and you want to bundle up in a blanket and sit by a fire. That sort of feeling is what you get from reading this book. So Martin perfectly immerses you in the setting, I feel. And for such a short book, Martin gives you a really good window into the character of Adara and her family and the world they live in and what's going on in the kingdoms surrounding them and the war that's going on. And this is set in the world of Ice and Fire. So if you've read A Song of Ice and Fire, it's set in that world loosely, I think. It doesn't clearly state in the book that it's part of that world, but from reading the flap of the book, it's intended to be part of that world. And there are little things that will allude to things you might be familiar with if you read A Song of Ice and Fire, but it doesn't outright state it's part of that world. And I've had some people tell me, oh, Chaz, no, it's not part of the world. It's just thought to be because it's similar. But no, it actually says on the flap here that it's set in the same world. So I'm assuming the publisher knows what they're talking about. So I'm gonna run with that. But if you were to pick this up and you never read A Song of Ice and Fire before, you wouldn't know that it's part of that world because it's a completely different setting. And so I think the connections are very, very loose for being in that world. But anyway, this is more of a YA book. So that makes it a very quick read as well. You know, the words aren't like simple by any means, but it is a book you can see. You know, it's just the font is pretty big and it's only like 120 pages, something like that. So It's a very easy read for a younger adult, maybe even an older middle grade. It just really depends. But it's definitely appropriate for that age. If you're a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire and you're wanting to maybe introduce your kids to that world at a younger age, with something that's more age appropriate, then this is probably a good way to do it. I'm not saying you do want to do that, but if you did, this is probably a good introduction. And it has dragons, and it reads like a fairy tale almost, and it's just a really, really good story. I had a blast reading it. I've been wanting to read this book for a long time. Even before I was on BookTube, I had heard about this book and kept telling myself, oh yeah, I'm going to read that one day. And I finally did, and I'm really glad I did. So yeah, those are some of the things I liked about it. There's not really any magic to speak of in the book. You know, dragons are magical, right? And there's a certain mystique that's happening there. And you might consider that you might consider the fact that Adara has a certain affinity for the wintertime to be a bit magical. But other than that, there's no magic in this story per se. And to be honest, I didn't really find anything that I disliked about this little book. There's just so much to like about it, and I felt like it deserved my highest rating on Goodreads. It was just that good for me. So I knew that George R. R. Martin was a really great writer, and this just further confirms that he is. So I really hope you'll pick it up. If I had to rank this book, I would put it in my soaring tier. It definitely holds a place as one of the best books I've read, and I'm glad it's in my library. It will stay in my library for sure, and I would love to reread it at some point, and I have a bunch of people I can recommend it to. My kids would really enjoy it, I think. Even though they're older now, I think they would really enjoy it. So I've got a lot of love for this book, and I hope you'll check it out. That's all I've got to say about that book. Have you read The Ice Dragon by George R. R. Martin? And what did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. If you've been on the fence about it or just haven't read it yet, let me know if you're even more excited to do so now. And let me tell you guys, this really is the perfect time of year to be reading a book like this. And it's short. It's a quick read, and that is always a good thing when you're a bookworm and wanting to read more books, right? So I will go ahead and end things there. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you read more books until I meet you again. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to all my patrons. I really appreciate all the support you give my channel.